Fox News is reporting that a federal grand jury has subpoenaed former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI officials, among others, as a part of the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. Let's hear now from Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff.
Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Obama, Monaco, all conspired together, all worked together to try to sabotage, undermine, unravel the democratic institutions and structures of this country. The Russiagate hoax, the Russiagate conspiracy, and all of the assaults against our liberties that went with it, the pre-dawn raids, the handcuffing of innocent Americans, the espionage against President Trump's campaign and staff.
Josh, could you see this investigation extending further to perhaps even include Barack Obama? Stephen Miller calls the Russian collusion conspiracy an insurrection.
Well, first of all, I love Stephen Miller. I've known Stephen for years. I am an unabashed fan. He's one of the more polarizing figures here in America, even within the broader right. I happen to be a longtime huge fan of Stephen's. I hope that Stephen actually has even higher ambitions, frankly, than White House Deputy Chief of Staff, which is what he currently has now. I think that guy is just an absolute rock star. Look, Barack Obama, Rita, if I'm being very candid with you, is probably not going to be prosecutable under the Trump versus United States Supreme Court precedent. That was the immunity case that came out of the court just last year, where they basically said that if there is a core Article 2 presidential power, then it is very difficult to prosecute. That's one of the whole things of the case. Now, having said that, if Barack Obama engaged in anti-constitutional subterfuge after the transition of power, so after January 20th, 2017, back during Trump's first term, if prosecutors and Harmeet Dillon and Pam Bondi, if all the folks in the DOJ can actually get evidence of that totally changes the calculation, to be honest with you. But right now, I don't see them getting Obama. I do think John Brennan has a real shot to get him on a perjury charge, if nothing else, because the perjury statute of limitations here in the United States, when you're talking about the federal crime, perjuring himself before Congress, is 5-year statute of limitations. And he had congressional testimony 4 years ago in 2021. That's just a lie. It's literally just a lie about the origins of the Russiagate collusion, going back to the transition period in December 2016 to January 2017, and the infamous ICA intelligence community assessment that basically was the origin of the weaponization of leading to the Mueller probe. He lied. He lied to Congress about that there. I genuinely hope that they prosecute John Brennan. Let's not forget that Jim Comey's actually already been indicted there. So John Brennan would kind of just be some additional icing on the cake. But, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't see them getting Barack Obama. Again, unless there's something that I'm missing, which is always possible. But frankly, I think John Brennan would actually be quite surprised if they can actually get him on perjury.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, these characters continued their election interference because they told us that the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. It was some sort of, again, Russian campaign. Now, let's hear from veteran Democrat operative James Carville. He's got his crystal ball out and he's making some bold predictions.
A Democrat is going to be elected in 2028. You know that. I know that. It's going to be a Democratic House. It's going to be a Democratic Senate. The Democratic president is going to announce a special transition advisory committee on the reform of the Supreme Court, that we could have our third branch of government has lost the faith and trust of the American people, that the number of Supreme Court justices go from 9 to 13. That's going to happen, people. That's going to happen to you. They're going to win. They're going to do some blue ribbon panel of distinguished jurists, and they are going to recommend 13, and a Democratic Senate and House are going to pass it, and the Democratic president is going to sign it because they have to do an intervention so we can have a Supreme Court that the American people trust again.
And by American people, he, of course, means those who vote Democrat only, Josh. How seriously do you take those predictions? I know he still has the respect of a lot of people. A lot of people see him as actually a sensible, old-school Democrat compared to the radical new ones. But are they serious about these so-called reforms to the Supreme Court?
Rita, my first question is, what is the Raging Cajun smoking? I mean, what kind of goods does he have there stashed in his house, down in Louisiana that would lead him to confidently make this pronunciation. I mean, frankly, if I were an ambitious local prosecutor, I would consider that video probable cause to launch a drug raid. I mean, I'm very curious what kind of goods he has stashed in the house that would lead him to say these crazy things there. But Jimmy Carville is basically the left-wing equivalent of Bill Kristol here in the U.S. I mean, Bill Kristol, to be clear, is now left-wing. He said he voted for Mamdani in New York City. Guy is totally out to lunch. But Carville, my point, Reed, is that this guy was actually sensible once upon a time. I mean, he was the brains of the 1992 winning Bill Clinton presidential campaign. He was the whole "it's the economy, stupid" guy there. He was the whole guy that devised the entire brilliant strategy. Not one that I would support if I were old enough to have opinions, but the strategy to essentially defeat George H.W. Bush on the whole read my lips, no new taxes thing. So he was actually a very clever political strategist, focused once upon a time on bread and butter issues like crime, the economy. And now he's just saying utterly far left garbage like this. He has no idea what he's talking about. No, Democrats are not going to pack the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. It's literally it's not going to happen. But having said that, the fact that someone who once upon a time was viewed as a centrist, reasonable, moderate figure is looking in the camera and is saying this confidently because of whatever he's currently on. He is making these pronunciations confidently. That should nonetheless, I think, be a clear message, not just to conservatives, but to swing voters in the middle as to what the Democratic Party has become today, because they are making threats, whether they are real or whether they're empty. And I do think that they are largely empty threats here, but they are playing with fire. Because they're talking here about the very nature of the American constitutional order. They want to add Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. Frankly, they want to abolish the U.S. Senate, Rita. They think the U.S. Senate itself, the senior legislative chamber, they view it as a vestige of a white patriarchal colonial society because Wyoming has the same number of votes in the Senate as California, New York. Garbage. I mean, there are very good reasons why we have this current setup here. They want to pat the court, though. They're playing with fire, and I think the American people are frankly going to look at videos like that, and they're going to say, I don't know what the heck this guy's talking about, but I know I don't like it. Therefore, I'm voting for the other guy.
Let's hope so. Now, we've spoken about the exodus from New York by those alarmed by Zoran Mamdani's triumph there. The Mamdani refugees will be fleeing New York City, and among them will be, sadly, many Jews, Josh. But despite Mamdani's radical rhetoric and anti-Israel views, the exit polls, the CNN exit polls, showed that 1 in 3 Jews in New York City voted for him. Does that surprise you?
Well, two things to note here, Rita. One is that if you look at the exit poll that I saw, to be clear, that number is galling. But on the other hand, it actually was a slightly lower percentage of Jews for Mamdani than Protestants and Catholics in New York for Mamdani. So Cuomo actually beat Mamdani in New York City among Jews, Catholics, and Protestants. Mamdani just won people who have no religious affiliation, and he won that by like a shockingly high margin. He got like 70% of the religiously unaffiliated votes. Having said that, 1/3 of Jews voting for Mamdani is obviously 1/3 too many. And you look at some heavily Jewish precincts, such as the Upper West Side, and the Upper West Side went for Mamdani. Now, a lot of the more religious communities in Brooklyn and so forth went very heavily for Cuomo against Mamdani. Rita, the reality here is that the Jewish community in the United States is extremely politically divided between religiously observant and just culturally traditional Jews and deeply assimilated, progressive, left-wing, reform Jews, et cetera there. My old friend Ben Shapiro likes to refer to these Jews as ginos, as Jews in name only, and in comparison to rhinos, Republicans name only there. They might be halakhically Jewish under Jewish law, that is to say. They might think that they enjoy a bagel and lox or watching Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm reruns, but there's nothing particularly Jewish about them there. And unfortunately, Rita, this is the story of the Jewish people going back thousands and thousands of years. The good news from a sheer demographic and political voting pattern perspective is that it is the more traditional and religious Jews that are actually marrying other Jews, unlike the left-wing Jews, who are having lots of Jewish children. So I think that the Jewish voting demographic in America, call it 10, 15, 20 years from now, is going to be considerably different looking than it is now. And I would argue considerably more right wing, which is a very good thing.
Josh Hammer, thank you for your time tonight.